Hello everyone. Masquerade Cult number 1, the Goetics. When jihadis assassinated Prime Minister Sarai Herschel, they began a conflict that was soon exploited not only by Israel's local Arab neighboring states, but by the Chinese, the Russians, the United States, Japan, and the European Union of Republics. This conflict would not end with conventional arms, but a nuclear fire. Fires that raced across North Africa, the entire Middle East, much of the Baltic states, and Russia itself. Almost all of interior China was burned, and even some parts of Canada. The majority of the world's Jewish population vanished in that nuclear fire, along with Medina, Mecca, Jerusalem, and other Muslim holy sites. And though Christians and Jews, not in the conflict, can move on from the destruction, for believing Muslims, particularly extremists, the outcome of the short war was incomprehensible, for it seemed to call into question, with physical evidence, the infallibility of the Quran. For the Quran said that for the end of days, certain things had to happen in Medina, Mecca, and Jerusalem, and they were no longer there. In retaliation and madness, these fanatics attacked everyone around them, including Muslims they did not feel were observantly Muslim enough. As with any war, the short war was actually primarily caused by an argument over resources, but with religion thrown into the stated reasons why it occurred, many people outside of the conflict turned not only against Islam, but against Judaism, Christianity, and the concepts of the Enlightenment that the Western societies held dear. For the Goetics, the distrust of religion and Enlightenment values is supreme. They are convinced that only power matters. Their holy book is not Levé's Satanic Bible, as is commonly believed, nor Crowley's thematic dissertations. No, they embrace older, medieval grimoires, such as the Munich manuscript Librum Incantorium Exorcisium et Fascinationum, the Pseudo-Monarchia Daemonium, and the book from which they get their name, the Goeta. From these they divine their metaphysical paradigm. They use books such as Might is Right, the Turner Diaries, the compiled letters and speeches of Benito Mussolini, and A Clockwork Orange to gain their political and social mores. And finally, they use a great deal of fiction from BDSM authors as a blueprint for what they feel to be the proper relationship between a man and woman. Many of them feel that the series Gore is actually an allegory for the pristine state of the human race, which, constrained by religion, has fallen from its savage beauty. For many of these masqueraders, the dictum, sin is the word of restriction, is dearly and truly believed. The first masquerader was most likely Sebastian Segal. The exact date of his epiphany is not known for certain. What is known is that Segal was the son of a very wealthy family whose income came from agri-farms. He went through a period of intense mockery and exclusion as a child because of his spindly build and frail constitution. He was also afflicted with a rare genetic disease that made his skin appear to have various color blotches. This same disorder made it dangerous for him to have any cosmetic surgery to correct it. He begged his parents often for operations or to have bioware installed that would help regulate his body's chemicals, but they refused out of fear for his life. His formative years were then spent in this kind of barren isolation, devoid of any friendship or love, and apart from the rest of his peers. Beatings by local bullies were so common that he was often in the hospital with a broken bone or a contusion, and finally his parents had to hire bodyguards for the boy. But though they protected his body, they did nothing to protect his sense of character. And sometime between 2065 and 2066, Segal compiled various quotes and principles from the works mentioned above, sacrificed a bull to demons from beyond, and Goetic urban myth says that this was in exchange for his smooth voice, dark wisdom, and the courage to see things through to his aims. It may have worked, as far as the Goetics are concerned, for Segal left that sacrifice on his farm and went to have various BioWare enhancements installed, risking death. He left the clinic with dark red skin, yellow eyes, a cybernetic tail that swished when he walked, and prominent horns. Less than a year after this, he had attracted a small following of adherents and a trio of what he called lovelies to accompany him. 3 years after the operation, he was making back a great deal of the money he had spent on his surgeries by giving speaking engagements and exploiting his growing flock of adherents. He began branching out into crime to help supply his growing drug addictions, and with wise investments and franchise fees for new dark churches, his influence and power began to grow. But anyone who believes they can keep a bunch of hedonistic, violent, demon-admiring anarchists under their thumb is in for a rude awakening. Rival dark churches began to emerge, and to stop them, Sebastian had to put down his foot. Violently. He was apprehended in Germany by authorities while he was near Bonn, engaged in the murder of another Goetic. It was actually his 5th murder, and German authorities sentenced him to incarceration. Sebastian found the German system of incarceration to be laughably naive, for the German system is intent on rehabilitation of prisoners, and it makes the assumption that the prisoners would want to return to the society that had incarcerated them. Sebastian wanted no such thing. He murdered another 2 inmates and a guard before escaping with aid from his lovelies. Another killing spree followed, complemented by arson, and he was finally stopped by being shot in the back of the head by one of his lovers for neglecting her. Sibel Segal tried to run the dark churches from that point on, but no one was listening to her. By then there were so many Goetics they could no longer be dominated by just one dominus. The Goetics augment themselves as much as possible. They prefer to use cyberware to imitate the appearance of demons. Red skin, implanted horns, illegal dragon's breath modifications all allow them to appear demonic and even spit fire. Cybernetic tails tipped with shock tips and holographic projectors on their head that display gleaming horns or raging fire. These are the Goetic aesthetic. Inflicting fear, pain, and taking what you want are considered the natural human virtues. They have several morphisms, gleaned from the writings of Sebastian and popular culture, that promote violence and crime. Some morphisms that are favorites of the Goetics are: sin is the word of restriction. Might is right. Peace is a lie. There is only desire. I desire to do my will. Others desire to do their will. Only one of us can prevail. Go along to get along is the song of a slave. Humans were not crafted to live in harmony, but in a state of strife. Darwin is the only prophet. Abrahamic thinking is slave thinking. Law is merely what someone stronger imposes on you. I live by my own law. I am my own law. I am not beholden to some book written by men I've never met who seek to dominate me. The weak serve, the strong rule. The weak obey, the strong command. This masquerade gang is feared worldwide by normal citizens, and you can see why. And law enforcement tends to only interfere with the gang when its activities threaten to leave the green zones that they normally inhabit. The gang is violent and prolific, but also highly unorganized. Most cities that are blighted by the gang will suffer a single gathering spot, such as a dark church. Leadership of the gang is done and determined through trial by combat, though it is often non-lethal combat, as the ethic of these masqueraders values conflict and strife. Leaving the defeated alive not only prevents the loss of an asset to the gang, but will create a beneficial level of paranoia in the leaders. The gang is led by its dominus or dominatrix, if she is strong enough. Female leaders often get challenged more often than males, so they tend to break off their collection of followers into separate units called harpies or furies. In addition to boasting themselves via cyberware, boosting themselves via cyberware. They tend to inject themselves with various combat chemicals. Close combat is reserved for foes that are deemed to be worthy of the spiritual experience. Indeed, the Goetics believe that a sword fight or a brawl is the ultimate spiritual experience, as one dominates the other and the other pays tribute in pain. The group's rituals always involve this element, that of pain. Entering the group is therefore not done lightly, for once the cult of the Dark Church allows you in, you are not allowed to leave, unless you prove yourself to be a coward. This caveat, however, only applies to men. Women are always considered to be property of the cult, even if they are only viewed as chattel. Vicious and proven fighters and operators are who are sought and given invitations to join. Most decline, for Goetic society is notorious for its rivalries. Many times when engaged in a robbery that's more complicated than a smash and grab, the cult will have one member turn on another, using the chaos to slay them or cause them to lose face in front of the other members. Police departments report that the Goetics, though very fearsome physically, have a particular masquerader ethos that is vulnerable to being defeated and exploited. They will often swear vengeance against those that beat them fairly in a physical combat, but defeating a Goetic through trickery or deception is a sure way to shame them into leaving a zone. Many times a city will somehow get the dominus or the dominatrix of the cult into an arrest, and because they are arrested and quickly convicted, the rest of the gang rapidly disappears, convinced the leader was too weak to actually be a real Goetic. Such deception and reliance upon law is viewed as the tool of the weak, and if the weak can defeat you, then you were never strong. The cult particularly targets its crimes at those that it perceives to be religious, particularly the Abrahamic faith's members. They burn mosques, raise synagogues, and rob churches. Priests can expect to be beaten, imams tortured, rabbis forced to commit violations of the Torah, and it does not need to be elaborated upon what they do to nuns' unbelieving mothers. The entire time the cult will taunt its victims to pray to God to save them. We cannot stress enough that all members of the Dark Church are therefore to be viewed as dangerous. Even if they appear to be merely a submissive servant or victim, they are still an agent of a violent criminal organization, and they are likely to bow to its wishes and its commands.